Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thank you for being here. Tomorrow we have our special on space and SpaceX and war against China for space supremacy. And what is Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company, doing? What are we doing on Mars? What's the goal? What's the plan? That's all coming up on tomorrow's special. First, though, I want to talk. It can't just be me. There's no way I'm the only one who just feels like our culture is completely spiraling out of control and spiraling more and more every single day. I mean, the big story of the day yesterday was Dr. Seuss, right? Canceling Dr. Seuss, but it's more than that. It's things just being sought out and targeted and destroyed. From Dr. Seuss to the Boy Scouts, of course, statues being torn down, Aunt Jemima removed from packaging. I mean, every day there's something, and these seem like little things. They seem like little things, but they translate into real life consequences as well. Boston School District has joined the club, with another school district here in San Diego as well, so it's all across the country, has joined this club of schools that have gotten rid of their advanced classes. All right, so you got your regular classes, and then you got your advanced classes, right, your honors classes. They got rid of them because they're not equitable. They're not equitable. There's not enough Black or Hispanic kids in them. Too many white and Asian kids. So we're just gonna get rid of them entirely. Things like that, all the way to, of course, what we talked about earlier in the week, advocating to give kids puberty-blocking drugs to appease transgender activists. You're like, what is going on in our country? I want to present something to you here in the next few minutes that is my most precise articulation of where we are and why we're here. And then you and other people won't get it. Other people, because they're not going to hear this. They're like, what's happening? Or why do I feel this way? Or what? They can't make sense of it. You will be able to make sense of it now. So when something happens, the next thing, right? So the canceling of whoever's next, right? Dr. Seuss this week, whoever's being canceled next week. And why our schools are doing these crazy things. Like, all of these things will now make sense to you. So I got 4 points here. First, I want to talk about world view. This is an interview from this show about 6 months ago with Melvin Tinker. He's the author of a book called That Hideous Strength, a deeper look at how the West was lost. And I asked him the difference. This clip is so perfect. This is a perfect clip. I asked him the difference between a Christian worldview and a Marxist worldview. Here it is.
Okay, well, any worldview tries to deal with 4 basic questions. First of all, there's the question, where do I come from? The question of origins. Who am I? The question of significance. Why is the world in a mess? The problem of evil or suffering. And then there's the question of, is there a future? That's the matter of purpose. Now, when you think about Marxism, whether it's classical Marxism or what's now called cultural Marxism, what you're dealing with here is a secularized religion, that only the material exists. In the words of the sociologist Peter Berger, we live in a universe without windows. Only what you can see and touch and feel is reality. So the answer to the first question for the Marxists, where do I come from? The answer is nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean absolute nothing. Not that there's something called nothing, there's nothing. And we're a result eventually of time plus chance and the material, that's all there is. Secondly, who am I? Well, for Marx and the cultural Marxists, man has no fixed nature. If you like, you can think of as being plastic and therefore malleable and can be changed into all sorts of things. There's no center. And Marx himself said that it's not the consciousness of men that determines their existence, but rather the social existence that determines their consciousness. And basically what that means is that all we are basically is just a product, particularly for Marx, of our economic and political environment. And then the cultural Marxists went on a bit further than that. One cultural Marxist in particular, called Erich Fromm, said actually gender itself, this is in the 1930s, gender itself is simply a social construct. There really is no basic difference between the sexes. Thirdly, why is the world in a mess? Well, of course, for the Marxists, it's due to capitalism and unjust economic political structures. And this is the oppression of the ruling by the ruling classes. For the cultural Marxists, they say, yeah, that's exactly the same problem. But with capitalism, you have some things which are inherently wrong with it. Namely, it's sexist, it's racist, and it's patriarchal. And therefore, you have the enslavement of minorities. That's the problem of evil. Fourthly, is there a future? Well, certainly for Marx, yeah. He said that inevitably there's going to be a violent revolution, the overthrow of the ruling classes, the establishment of, if you like, a workers' paradise. The cultural Marxists take a slightly different tact. Instead of going for violent revolution, they say, no, what we've got to do, to use one of their phrases, is go for a long march through the institutions, eventually to capture the culture-making institutions, church, the media, marketing, and especially education. So we shape the way people think and what is considered to be the new norm. And then eventually, following on from that, you can have coercion where you force people to believe these certain things. And eventually, again, you're going to get utopia. So the key for both Marxists and neo-Marxists is that you've got to abolish private property, you've got to abolish the family, and you've got to abolish the church. Quickly, Christian worldview, totally different. We're created by a personal, infinite, triune God. He made a universe as an outflow of his love. Secondly, man is a personal being made in the image of God. We're not nothings, we're something. Loved by him, made to love him, and to be ruled under him lovingly. What's the problem? Well, the real problem is sin, this open rebellion against our Maker. We're wanting to dethrone God. And evil itself is considered to be parasitic on the good. It's a corruption of the good. And then, of course, is there a future? Yes, there is, because God came in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, on a rescue mission to put us right with him by dying on the cross to atone for our sins, rising from the dead, ascended as the ruler of the universe, sending his Holy Spirit to produce a new community called the church. And as the gospel is proclaimed, lives are transformed and society is transformed. And he's going to come again, and there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. The two could not be different.
How perfect is that? Okay, that's the first point. Worldviews. Let's define cultural Marxism. So first, Marxism, because you heard him say it a few times there. Marxism sees the world as a constant power struggle, right? Everything is a battle between the oppressed and the oppressors. In Marx's case, it was in terms of class, right? So you had the rich and then the working class, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, right? The bourgeoisie were the rich, the proletariat were the people, the workers. Marx and Engels, Friedrich Engels, his partner, were certain that there would be a workers' revolution. But there wasn't. There wasn't that violent overthrow that Melvin was just talking about there. So these Marxists, after World War I, they thought, why not? Why? What happened? The worker, why didn't they start the revolution and take over the elite? It's because the workers are brainwashed. That's what their conclusion. Their conclusion was that the workers are living in a false consciousness. So the way to really inspire the people to overthrow the elites is to really get them to see how oppressed they are, not just when it comes to class, but also when it comes to race and gender and anything else that you could be a victim of. This was led by many people, but Herbert Marcuse in particular. Herbert Marcuse fled Nazi Germany right when the Nazis were taking over. He went to go teach at Columbia and Harvard and then at University of California, San Diego. He hated capitalism. Now you'd think hanging out on the beaches in San Diego would make him like capitalism and the prosperity that comes from it, but it made him hate it even more because he realized that the working class here in San Diego did not aspire to overthrow the rich elites, right? That was his whole thing, is like, we need the workers to overthrow the rich. And he comes to San Diego and everyone's hanging out at the beach, not overthrowing anyone. He noticed the working class here in San Diego, they didn't aspire to overthrow the elite, they aspired to own a home. They aspired to work hard, get some money, and and own a home. That's not going to cause people to create a revolution. So in the 60s, they added other oppressed classes to their Marxist framework. Black people were the new aggrieved working class to overthrow white supremacy, and then women were the new working class to overthrow the patriarchy. So you get the Black Panthers and you got feminists. Right? So you take these people's grievances, you blow them up, and then you put them out into the real world to take over every institution that exists. The march through the institutions. Education, media, art, music, entertainment, and even business now. We talked about earlier in the week. The last domino to fall in this march through the institutions was business. Business has fallen. All these businesses have gone woke, and that's it. That's the tearing down of capitalism. That was the plan all along. Those are cultural Marxists. Everything is a battle between the oppressed and the oppressors, and your job as a cultural Marxist, a good little cultural Marxist, is to go and find it and exploit it. Everything that cultural Marxists see is through the prism of oppression, even Dr. Seuss. Which leads us to my third point, critical theory versus critical thinking. I know I've talked about this a lot, but I want to keep doing it until we all firmly understand it. Critical thinking is good. Critical thinking, you ask questions so that you can get closer to the truth. That's a good thing. Critical theory seeks to ask questions so you can destroy that institution or thing itself, right? From Boy Scouts to the family, right? Disrupt the nuclear family. That's what Black Lives Matter says. That's one of their pillars. They wrote it. We want to disrupt the nuclear family. Disrupt means to destroy. NFL, education, architecture, music, movies, art, you name it. Give me an example in art. First, just as a comparison, this is Michelangelo's Pieta. He sculpted this when he was 23. This is the Orange County Museum of Art. A 28-foot tall statue of a dog, which frequently, from time to time, urinates yellow paint on the side of the art museum. Art. 2016, the Guggenheim in New York had a pure gold toilet that people could use. The exhibition was called America. You can see these people's ideas through their art, right? Through their modern art. Their art that's nonsense, that is disgusting, that uses menstrual blood and urine and fecal matter. We've gone from a statue of Jesus in Mary's lap after the crucifixion to dogs urinating on buildings. These are their ideas in the flesh. This is a perfect representation and manifestation of their ideas, and they're proud about it. And worst of all, they shame you into thinking and saying it's beautiful too. So that's where we are as a country. Any questions? One last thing, I got a minute. This may be one of the most important things to understand. The point of Marx, the goal, was a revolution of the working class over the rich, a violent one, in fact. We should do another segment on Karl Marx one of these days. He was a wicked person, ungrateful, narcissistic, egomaniac, a bitter drunk. He celebrated when family members died so that he could get their inheritance to fund his lazy lifestyle. He was a terrible person. Marx's goal was to create a revolution. That was the point of it all. So all these divisions we see today that are led by the cultural Marxists, that's the point. And that's what we said yesterday with Dr. Seuss and Dolly Parton. Why are the cultural Marxists going after them? Because they're unifying things. Everyone loves Dr. Seuss. Everyone loves Dolly Parton. So the left has to seek and destroy those because that's a unifying point. They can't have unity. They need violence and destruction and division. And it's frustrating that people can't see that. And then you get people like me and you calling for unity over unity around Christian principles, or if you're not a Christian, unity around proven American principles, right? We're calling for unity around these proven things, and we're the racists. We're the bad guys. When will people see the true story? Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want us to be trained, all of us, and I forget this often. Whenever something happens in the news, whenever something's going on, first thought, follow the money. First thought, follow the money. Now, when it comes to Dr. Seuss being canceled, yesterday, we spent a lot of time talking about the like philosophical reasons why the left is going after Dr. Seuss. And all this stuff's true, right? They're attacking the innocence of childhood. They're attacking a shared cultural value, disunity for disunity's sake. And there's a lot going on there. We talked all about that. You can actually, if you missed that segment, you can check it out on our app on the First, on your phone. Just search for the First TV. You can download the app and all of our shows are right there. And all that stuff is totally true. But never overlook the fact that there's money to be made somewhere. Someone's making money off of these things. Now, if you want to be super cynical, you could say that the Dr. Seuss organization canceled their own books to get publicity so that all their other books could be numbers 1 through 10 on the bestsellers list, which they are right now. Maybe. But there's also money to be made by the grievance industry. There's money to be made by the race baiters and the grievance industry. And I'll give you an example here. But first, I'll give this example through one of Dr. Seuss's prophecies at this point. One of his books is called The SNEETCHES. The SNEETCHES on the beaches. Here's the very short of it. There are these birds that have, some of them have stars on their bellies, and some do not have stars on their bellies. So the ones with stars are vastly superior to the ones without. Right? So this guy comes to town who you just saw. His name's Sylvester McMoney McBean. And he's got a machine that for $3 will print a star on your stomach. So all the ones without stars pay $3 to walk through this machine, as you just see, and then they get popped out with a star on their stomach, and now everyone's equal. But then the birds that had stars on their bellies, they don't want it anymore. Because now they're all equal, and they don't want to be equal because they're superior. So wouldn't you know it, this same businessman has another machine called the Star Eradication Machine. And for just $10, you can get this star taken off of your stomach. Eradicate these with the greatest of ease, provided you pay your $10, if you please. So they paid the $10 to get the star taken off, and now no one has the star. And now the ones with the stars want to take it off again, so they pay $10 to go through the Star Eradication Machine, and then the ones who then just took it off previously go back through the star on machine, and you get the chaos that happens as they keep going back and forth through each of the different machines, and each time paying the guy money. And I love the end of the story, and you see the cartoon here, because the businessman rides off with all the cash. He rides off, and he says they'll never learn. Here he's packing up his machines to leave right now. He said they'll never learn. The SNEETCHES did figure it out, though. And at the end, they decided that none of them are superior. Here he's laughing his way to the bank. The SNEETCHES decided that none of them are superior over any other, and they shake hands, and they learned their lesson. Dr. Seuss crushed that story. That story is perfect because not only did he get the racism allegory right and how silly it is to focus on these petty differences that don't matter at all, right? So the racial allegory is spot on perfect. But he also got the grifter in there, right? He got the money-hungry grifter profiting off of the division. See it? He knew that there were people profiting off of division, and the guy got away scot-free as well. And that's what's happening here. Always follow the money. There's two people behind this effort to cancel Dr. Seuss. Ramon Stevens, who is a PhD student in education at UC, University of California, San Diego, and Katie Ishizuka, who, their husband and wife. They happen to be founders of this company called The Conscious Kid. The Conscious Kid is a subscription service where you pay them money and they will send you woke children's books. The tag at the top says, "We support organizations, families, and educators in taking action to disrupt racism in young children." So did you get this? You pay them money and they'll send you woke books. The group that sponsors Read Across America. They're called like the American Literary Association. It's something like that, whatever. The big group that organizes Read Across America, which starts on Dr. Seuss's birthday, which was 2 days ago, the day they got announced that they're not publishing 6 of their books. That group has Cat in the Hat as their logo, right? They have, wouldn't you know it, a new reading list out this year. They've updated the suggested reading list. No Dr. Seuss books, of course, they're racist. But Woke Baby's on there. Woke Baby is on there. Also, Say Her Name, which is a book of poetry about victims of police brutality. And it's got Black Lives Matter on the cover. So these books have been out for a while now, but no one buys them. So how do we get these books into people's hands? You know, for the betterment of the children. Sure, I'll charge for them, I guess. How do we get these books into people's hands? Well, we got to clear out Dr. Seuss. That's a good start. He's got too many books anyway. How do we clear out Dr. Seuss? Everyone loves Dr. Seuss. He's beloved. How do you get rid of Dr. Seuss books? Well, I don't know. Let's say, so I just got a vision of all these people sitting around, these money-hungry grifters. What can we do? How do we get rid of Dr. Seuss? Everyone loves Dr. Seuss. I don't know. Let's say Dr. Seuss is racist. Dr. Seuss is racist? What do you mean Dr. Seuss is racist? Dr. Seuss is not racist. Haven't you ever read the SNEETCHES? He's not racist. I don't know. Let's say that the Cat in the Hat is a black-faced minstrel show. Oh, brilliant. And that's the claim against Dr. Seuss. Remember we played, we shared a sentence from the LA Times, or the AP, it was an Associated Press article, and it said that the Cat in the Hat, one of Seuss's most popular books, is still in print for now. Like, for now? What could possibly be wrong with Cat in the Hat? Well, I read the academic article from those 2 people I just told you about, and they claim that Cat in the Hat is a minstrel show performer. No one knows what a minstrel show is. Like, the only time I ever hear about minstrel shows is from these black activists telling me that everything's a minstrel show. I don't know, no one knows what this is. But apparently the Cat in the Hat is a black-faced minstrel performer and these are these guys' words, with his floppy bow tie and white gloves, and I'm not kidding, frequently open mouth. And the fact that he's an entertainer for the whole family makes him a minstrel show performer. Something. One of the lines from this article from this academic article is, it's very dehumanizing for black children to be expected to wear one of those hats. It's dehumanizing. Guys, do we have the picture of Michelle Obama reading? There you go, look at all those kids being dehumanized. So the logo right now of Read Across America is the Cat in the Hat. So if these grifters can claim that that's a black-faced minstrel show, then clear out space and we'll sell them our anti-racist children's books. It's genius. It's genius. Just like that guy in the SNEETCHES was genius. So always look for the money. Now, of course, there's ideology as well. I mentioned this in passing. Let me do this one quick. The woke activists on the left, they want to destroy childhood innocence. Again, everything is a power struggle between the oppressed and the oppressors, even childhood. Children are oppressed. Children are the oppressed, adults are the oppressors. Adults, the white, straight, male aggressors, oppress children. So the activists say, we need to get to the children before they're indoctrinated into the straight, white, male culture of oppressive America. That's why they promote Drag Queen Story Hour. That's what that is. That's what Drag Queen Story Hour is, right? To introduce queer sexuality to children as young as possible and normalize perversion. That's why the left needs to talk about racism as soon as possible to kids, to train them to judge people based on the color of their skin from as young of an age as possible. They're coming after your kids. Do you see it? Do you see it? Will you see it? There's a woke war on the innocence of childhood. Children can't be innocent. They must be activists. One last point on canceling Dr. Seuss. I love one of the, this is what happens when you spend time on something like this, right? You get a lot of people on the left who are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you making such a big deal about this for? Why? This is a line that the left uses. Why do you even care? It's like, well, first of all, you care because you're the one who canceled him. So clearly you care about it. But here's why it matters. The more you go along with this, now let me word it like this. You can't go along with this stuff. You have to stop it as soon as possible. The more ridiculous the thing that the left gets you to do, the more they have you and the more they control you. Remember a couple months ago we talked about the word folks, F-O-L-K-S? Instead of saying hey guys, you're supposed to say hey folks, because that's a more trans inclusive term, or that's more gender inclusive. But now they spell folks F-O-L-X, because that's more trans inclusive, right? Women is spelled W-O-M-X-N. Latinx instead of Latino or Latina. You're like, what is this? Who is this for? It's for the most extreme queer theory activists. That's all, right? They're the only ones who care about this, and they're the ones who are making you do it and pressuring our culture to change it. Why, though? Because the more ridiculous thing that they can make you do, the more they can get you to do anything, the more likely you are to do anything they say. This is the important thing to understand about propaganda. Propaganda does not brainwash people. Propaganda does not brainwash people. It's done to demonstrate power. There's three elements of propaganda. First, the fact that it's everywhere, right? So you're walking around China, you're walking around North Korea, the propaganda is everywhere. And that shows people that these people are in control of everything. So it's the omnipresence of it, it's everywhere. The second element of propaganda is the further away from common sense it is, the stronger the sensation of control that people feel. Because people think, geez, if they can get away with that lie, imagine how powerful they really are. My favorite propaganda lie is that Kim Jong-il, on his first time he ever played golf, scored a 21. He got 15 holes in one. 15 hole-in-ones. 15. All right? So, like, no one believes that. But if they can get away with that, how powerful are they? And the third reason propaganda is it's done to humiliate you. Theodore Dalrymple, one of my favorite writers, he has a line that says, in my study of communist societies, he says, I came to the conclusion that the purpose of communist propaganda was not to persuade or convince, nor to inform, but to humiliate. And therefore, the less it corresponded to reality, the better. If you're a dad and you go to drag queen story hour with your kids, or if you let your wife take your kids to a drag queen story hour, you're humiliated. You are absolutely humiliated. And what can't they get away with now? Where do you now draw the line? You send your kids to drag queen story hour so they can see stuff like this? And now you think you can draw a line? Don't be humiliated. Look past the propaganda, find the true story. Mike Slater, spread the word. So HR 1 just passed the House today. So I want to talk a bit about that, but check out our next guest. There's a New York Times article written about him. It says, conservative group wants to bring brass knuckles approach to judicial fray. Mike Davis is known as a take no prisoners conservative, eager to challenge the left with hardball tactics. Mike Davis is here. He's the founder of the Article 3 Project. Mike, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Let's talk about these hard ball tactics and whatever. Because HR 1 is the federalization of all the terrible things that were in the 2020 election when it came to the election process, right? It federalizes all the worst parts of what happened. That's pretty hardball from the left, right? That's how they play. How have Republicans played / how should we play?
Well, Republicans tend to not punch back like we should, and it's a mistake. I think that what we demonstrated, I was the chief counsel for nominations on the Senate Judiciary Committee for then Chairman Chuck Grassley from my home state of Iowa during the Kavanaugh confirmation. And I think what we showed with the Kavanaugh confirmation is if you punch back, Democrats oftentimes have glass jaws and you can break them. And so with Kavanaugh, they thought they were going to take down a Supreme Court nominee. They thought that they were going to win the Senate. The Democrats were going to win the Senate in the process. They were going to block the nomination until the end of President Trump's term, and they're going to appoint their own Supreme Court justice. And we showed that wasn't going to happen. Not only did we win the Kavanaugh fight, we also sent 4 Democrat incumbents packing. We sent them home. They lost re-election over, at least in part, over the Kavanaugh fight.
Was there, and I don't want to get too much on the Kavanaugh, but was there a moment in the Kavanaugh fight when Kavanaugh / the president / Grassley and you thought about not fighting and giving up and trying someone new?
I don't think that was ever the problem. I can't speak for the president, but I know that was never the problem for then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and then Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley was my boss, and those two were rock solid throughout the entire process. And I will tell you that there were a lot of Republicans who wanted to cut and run, and fortunately we did not because of the leadership of McConnell and Grassley.
So what does punchback look like? Because if we don't define it properly, then people just go into storming the Capitol, right? So what does punchback look like? Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. I mean, I think that what we have to do is use the tactics that the Democrats have used against Republican nominees. We need to, like we just saw this with Neera Tanden for OMB director. She was, constantly criticizing Republican senators on Twitter. She was President Biden's nominee to be the director of the Office of Management and Budget. For people outside of the swamp, they may not understand what that means. That is a big job. You are the traffic cop for regulations. You are the person who decides what the budget priorities are going to be for the administration. You're constantly negotiating with Congress. And Neera Tanden was a vocal political critic of Republican senators for a long time on Twitter, calling them names. And, she in the past, Republicans would have just said, okay, well, this is the president's pick for the Office of Management and Budget. We're just going to roll over and let the president have whoever he wants. This time they didn't. Neera Tanden, she's going to have plenty of time to tweet now because she's not going to be the OMB director.
So the response that I've heard on the left is, oh, you sensitive Republicans. Oh, she said mean things and you can't take it. What do you say to that?
Well, she's not the OMB director now, so she's not in President Biden's cabinet. She's going to have plenty of time to send out mean and sensitive tweets now. So I'm happy for her. It'll be a good use of her time because she's not going to be one of the most important officials in the federal government.
It sounds like the deal is holding the left to their own standards, or at least to the standards they say they want to hold the right to. Let's jump to filibuster. Can you explain what the filibuster is? If I'm walking down the street and someone asks me, what do I tell them? What's the filibuster?
Yeah, in the House of Representatives, a simple majority. You pass legislation with a simple majority. In the Senate, it's different. Since the 1830s, you have had a supermajority requirement to pass legislation. So right now, it requires 60 votes to pass most legislation, and there's a reason for that. Our founders understood that the Senate was the cooling saucer. It was the place where you're supposed to have more deliberation, and you're supposed to have senators who are looking out more for the national interest as opposed to their particular interest of a district of the House of Representatives. What the Democrats are trying to do, what they want to do, is they want to what's called NUKE the legislative filibuster. They want to lower the vote threshold that we've had from the 1830s from 60 to 51 votes, and then they want to do that so they can jam through radical revolutionary change. They want to pack the Supreme Court. We've had 9 justices on the Supreme Court since 1869, more than 150 years ago, right after the Civil War. Democrats want to pack the Supreme Court, and so they can jam through their unconstitutional legislation, whether it relates to H.R. 1, voter legislation, whether it relates to the Second Amendment, whether it relates to the First Amendment with free speech, whatever their liberal agenda is. They know that the courts are gonna strike much of it down because it's unconstitutional. So they just want to change the courts. They want to pack the Supreme Courts. It is a radical assault on judicial independence. It is a threat to our liberties. FDR tried this in the in the 1930s at the height of his popularity, and he failed. The late great RBG Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the lioness of the left, before she passed away, she came out and threw cold water on the Democrats' plan to pack the court. It is an extreme measure, and it cannot happen. And they'll pack the court. They also want to add new states: D.C., Puerto Rico, maybe the Virgin Islands, maybe Guam. Who knows where it ends? And the reason they want to do that is because they want more Democrat senators. This is all for Democrats. This is not some principled reason. This is purely about power.
When it comes to getting rid of the filibuster, there's no way. Obviously, they would want to do it if they could stay in power forever. But do they really think they would stay in power forever? I mean, I guess if they do all those other things too, then they would. But
well,
that's the play?
That's the play. I mean, they would have. I think Democrats understand that they have a 2-year window here before they lose the House of Representatives. They have a very narrow majority in the House of Representatives. I don't think anyone seriously believes that Joe Biden is going to run for re-election. And so they have this very short window of opportunity over the next 2 years to jam through revolutionary change for the Democrats. And I think that's the play. If they have the votes to do it, they're going to do it.
If they were going to do it, they would do it with H.R. 1, though, wouldn't they? Because, again, that would change elections forever, everywhere.
Yeah.
So do you see that being a thing they do, like now, like this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to pass it through the House. The issue is they need 60 votes in the Senate. Now, if Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia says, okay, I'm going to switch, I'm going to change my mind, I'm going to nuke the legislative filibuster, then the Democrats can pass it with a simple majority. Now, Manchin has just said this week that he's not going to change his mind. He's not going to nuke the legislative filibuster, which is great. I think this is very important. As conservatives, as Republicans, we need to be able to praise people like Joe Manchin when they buck their party and do things like this, because Joe Manchin is literally the last line of defense for our country being overtaken by extreme liberalism from, where you're going to have the court packed, you're going to have new states with Democrat senators, you're going to have voting just completely out of control and unverifiable.
The fate of the republic lies on Joe Manchin's shoulders. Wow. Mike Davis, let's stay in touch and talk some more. Founder of the Article 3 Project. Thanks, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's concerning. Because you're right, they'd have to move fast. They would have to do it these 2 years because they're not going to hang on to the House and then it wouldn't work anymore. So they have just these 2 years to get whatever they want done, and they'd have to do it now. I want to come back and we'll talk about minimum wage and how this is a horrible idea, but obviously always back on the table with the left. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Snyder Crusaders, I want to talk about the minimum wage. Not only is the left once again calling for a $15 minimum wage federally, but you also have Amazon lobbying for a $15 minimum wage. When you have the biggest company lobbying for a $15 minimum wage, hopefully some red flags go up. There's something going on here. Michael Farron is here. He's a research fellow at the Mercatus Center, the wonderful Mercatus Center at George Mason. Mr. Farron, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How about you, Mike?
Good to talk to you. Let's talk about that Amazon thing first. Why is Amazon calling for a $15 minimum wage?
Well, arguably, it's not because Amazon has suddenly become altruistic. There's a lot of economics research on regulatory capture, ways that regulations get twisted to serve particular industrial or corporate interests, not the actual public interest. A piece of regulatory capture is called raising rivals' costs, and arguably this is what Amazon is trying to do right now. A couple years ago, Amazon said, we're going to go ahead and raise all of our employees' starting wages to $15 an hour. Notably, at the same time, they got rid of some of the stock bonuses and annual bonuses that they would have paid out otherwise. And at the same time, what they can do, especially with one of their major competitors, Walmart, who is not paying $15 an hour right now, is mandate that all their competitors move up to the level that they have already set. And so what that means is that it's costless for them to adapt to it, but it's harmful to their competitors. It allows Amazon to grab that extra piece of market share. And so arguably, it's not altruistic at all.
It's so clear, as you just explained it right there, but people are going to fall for it. But let's speak to that. So I feel like we've been talking about minimum wage forever, right? So I feel like we know most of the arguments. The one that's most compelling, and it's not convincing enough, but most compelling, is Walmart pays not a lot, and people who work at Walmart therefore have to go on welfare, and they have to get all these other government benefits. So in the end, we, the people, the rest of us, are paying for Walmart's low wages anyway. What do you make of that argument?
So the argument is flawed. It's understandable, but flawed. It's what I like to call a policy-induced externality. And that's a $10 word for saying that it's something that looks like a problem because we have agreed to provide a government-provided social safety net that is not part of, call it, the natural scheme of things. So it's only looks like Amazon or Walmart isn't offering enough in terms of a living wage because we have generously, because we are a generous society, agreed to provide those sort of safety nets for people. If you took those safety nets away, it wouldn't change the wages that Amazon or Walmart offer to employees. So what that means is that it's not because of those government policies that people are having to pay more. It's actually many government social safety nets raise what economists call the reservation wage. And that's a fancy way of saying the wage that's high enough to get you off of the couch or out of doing home production and working in the marketplace. And so arguably many of the social safety nets actually increase the wage that people are willing to accept in order to go to work. So there's no way that most government social safety nets actually are subsidizing low-wage workers. The only way that would be possible is through a wage subsidy.
Okay, this is interesting. So Liz, I'm right with you. I'm totally with you on philosophically and economically here. So, but I would have thought that as welfare payments go up, let's say, Walmart wages would go down because they could. You're saying there's no correlation between the two, or no connection, no causation between the two.
No, there isn't. Especially if there isn't a work requirement in the social safety net or the welfare payments. If there is a work requirement, things get a little bit more complicated. Many of our programs do have work requirements these days. But think about it. If you can get the equivalent of, say, $5 an hour for not working because of welfare payments or whatever else, then any employer has to offer you at least $5 an hour in order to make you come to work. And if you actually value, say, staying at home with your family and watching your children and that sort of thing at $8 an hour, then that $5 an hour plus $8 an hour is actually $13 an hour. So an employer has to offer you $13 an hour before you actually go to work for them. So that's how this reservation wage aspect plays out. If there's a work requirement in there, it's possible that employers could capture some of the benefits of those social safety net programs, but they definitely don't capture all of them. And in general, more generous social safety net programs would actually drive up the cost of wages for employers. And that's because wages are determined not by what employers are willing to pay, but by what employers are willing to pay and what employees are willing to accept. It's a voluntary arrangement, and that's why it's not such a simple story as you mentioned.
Oh, that's so good. Gosh, that's smart. And one of our principles of the show is perhaps the opposite is true, and you just proved one of those being the case. Michael, we only got about 90 seconds, but you wrote an article called Subsidized Wages Should Assist Workers, Not Minimum Wages. What's a subsidized wage?
That's a wage subsidy, like I mentioned earlier. We already have a version of a wage subsidy in the Earned Income Tax Credit, which provides a lump sum payment at tax return time for families that don't earn much money, and it's kind of tailored according to how many dependents they have. Now, that's a good approach, and it's better than a minimum wage, because a minimum wage increases labor supply by increasing compensation, but it decreases labor demand by making it more expensive to hire a worker. A wage subsidy both increases labor supply and increases labor demand, because the employer does manage to capture a little bit of that wage subsidy. And so what that means is a wage subsidy is far better for low-income workers than a minimum wage.
Oh, I hate we gotta go. This deserves like a whole lecture class on it. But let's do more research. Subsidized wage, and just Google Michael Farren, and you can find the full article. Mr. Farren, let's talk again, sir. Grateful for you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Please keep up the good work, spreading the good news of free markets. Tomorrow, speaking of free market, talk about space. That's our special. Talk about Elon Musk, SpaceX, NASA, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, all these private space companies and space wars against China. That's our big special tomorrow. See you then. Spread the word.